The notification on my phone made my stomach drop. Chase Bank. Unusual activity detected on account ending in 4892. Transaction amount $3,847. Location Miami, Florida. I was sitting in my apartment in Denver, Colorado, staring at a charge I definitely didn't make. My hands trembled as I opened my banking app. Transaction after transaction. Best to buy, $2,100. Cash advance, $1,500. Western Union, $950. Gas stations I'd never been to. Hotels I'd never stayed at. In 3 days, someone had drained my checking account and maxed out 2 credit cards. But before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I knew exactly who had done this. The only person who had access to my wallet when I wasn't looking. The person I'd stupidly trusted with a spare key to my apartment. My brother, Marcus. I called Chase immediately, my voice shaking as I explained the fraudulent charges. The representative was sympathetic but firm. I'd need to file a police report. The charges would be investigated. My accounts would be frozen for protection. Meanwhile, my rent was due in 2 days, and I had exactly $17 to my name. Marcus had been spiraling for months. What started as weekend party drugs had evolved into something much darker. I'd noticed the changes gradually. The weight loss, the paranoid rambling, the way he'd disappear for days, then show up at my door at 3 in the morning, talking too fast about business opportunities and get-rich-quick schemes. Mom and Dad lived in denial, convinced their golden boy was just going through a rough patch. They'd funded his last 3 apartment deposits after landlords evicted him. They'd co-signed for a car he'd totaled within a month. They'd given him cash for job interviews that never seemed to materialize into actual employment. But I'd been the practical one, the responsible sister who worked 60-hour weeks as a dental hygienist to afford my own place, the one who'd graduated college debt-free through scholarships and part-time jobs, the one who saved every penny for emergencies. And now my emergency fund was gone, stolen by the person who was supposed to have my back. I called his phone, straight to voicemail. His last known address was a studio apartment in Aurora that he'd probably already been evicted from. I drove there anyway, my heart pounding as I knocked on the door. A neighbor peeked out, recognizing me from previous visits. "Your brother moved out weeks ago," Mrs. Chen said, her expression sympathetic. "Left in the middle of the night. Landlord found drug paraphernalia and thousands of dollars worth of electronics still in boxes. Never seen so many phones and laptops in one place." Electronics still in boxes. My stomach turned. Those weren't his electronics. They were purchased with my stolen money. I thanked Mrs. Chen and sat in my apartment trying to process the magnitude of what Marcus had done. This wasn't just stealing my credit cards. This was a systematic operation. I drove to my parents' house, hoping they might have heard from him. Mom answered the door with flour on her apron, always cooking something elaborate, as if perfect meals could solve our family's problems. "Isabella, what a nice surprise! I just made apple turnovers. Marcus was here earlier asking about you, actually." My blood ran cold. What did he want to know? Dad appeared behind her, still in his work clothes from the auto shop. "Just wondering if you were doing okay. He seemed worried about your finances." Worried about my finances. The irony was suffocating. "What exactly did he say?" I pressed. Mom waved dismissively. "Oh, you know how he is, always concerned about his little sister. He mentioned something about helping you with some bills, said you'd been struggling." The lie came so easily to him. Even now, with my life in financial ruin, he was painting himself as the caring brother. I wanted to scream, to tell them everything, but something held me back. Maybe it was the way they looked at him versus how they looked at me. Marcus was their miracle baby, born when they thought they couldn't have more children. He could do no wrong in their eyes. Has he seemed different lately? I asked carefully. Dad shrugged. He's been excited about some new business venture, something with computers and technology. Says he's finally found his calling. Business venture. My stolen money funding his drug habit, and he'd convinced our parents it was entrepreneurship. The manipulation was breathtaking. I left without telling them the truth. Something deep in my gut told me this confrontation needed to happen differently. I needed evidence. I needed proof that even they couldn't dismiss or rationalize away. That night, I sat in my apartment reviewing bank statements and credit card records. The pattern was clear and systematic. Small purchases at first, testing if I'd notice. When I didn't catch on immediately, the amounts escalated. Gas stations became grocery stores. Grocery stores became electronics retailers. Electronics retailers became cash advances and money transfers. This wasn't impulsive drug buying. This was calculated financial theft with a clear progression. I started making calls. The hotels charged to my card confirmed a guest matching Marcus's description had stayed there with different women each night. The electronics stores had security footage of him purchasing items with my cards, paying no attention to the cameras, confident in his immunity from consequences. Best Buy's loss prevention officer was particularly helpful. This guy knew exactly what he was buying, he told me. High resale items, phones, laptops, gaming equipment. He asked about return policies and warranty transfers. This wasn't someone buying for personal use. The picture became clear. Marcus wasn't just funding his addiction with my money. He was running a resale operation, buying electronics with stolen credit, then flipping them for cash to buy drugs. The scale suggested he'd been doing this for months, possibly with other people's information too. I felt sick thinking about how long he'd been planning this, how he'd studied my habits, waited for the perfect opportunity to strike. By the third day, I'd documented everything. Screenshots of transactions, hotel receipts, store security footage, witness statements from neighbors about the mysterious electronics. The police report I filed was thick with evidence. The detective assigned to my case, Officer Martinez, was impressed by my thoroughness. Most credit card fraud victims don't gather this level of documentation, she said. This will make prosecution much easier if we catch him. If we catch him. Marcus had vanished completely. His phone was disconnected. His known associates claimed they hadn't seen him. Even his dealer, according to street sources I probably shouldn't have contacted, said he disappeared after making several large purchases. But I had a feeling his disappearance wouldn't last long. Addicts always surface eventually, driven by their need for their next fix. And when Marcus surfaced, I'd be ready. The financial impact was devastating. My landlord granted a 1-week extension on rent after I showed him the police report, but his patience had limits. My credit score plummeted as the fraudulent charges triggered late payments and over-limit fees. The bank promised to restore my funds, but the investigation process could take months. Meanwhile, I was living on credit and hope, rationing groceries and walking to work to save gas money. But something else was building inside me alongside the financial stress. Anger. Pure, focused rage at the betrayal. This wasn't just about money. This was about trust, family, and the assumption that blood meant something. Marcus had violated not just my financial security, but my faith in the people closest to me. He'd used my love for him as a weapon against me. And somehow, I knew this was just the beginning of a much larger story. What I discovered next changed everything. While digging through Marcus's social media accounts, trying to find clues about his whereabouts, I stumbled across something that made my blood freeze. A private Instagram story from 2 weeks ago showed him at a house party, but it wasn't the drugs or alcohol that caught my attention. It was the laptop open on the coffee table behind him, displaying what looked like a spreadsheet with names, addresses, and numbers. Lots of numbers. I screenshotted the image and zoomed in. The quality was poor, but I could make out columns labeled with what appeared to be credit card information. This wasn't just about my stolen cards. Marcus was involved in something much bigger. I sat staring at my phone screen until my eyes burned, trying to process what this meant. My brother wasn't just an addict stealing from family. He was part of an organized credit card fraud ring. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Every family dinner where he'd seemed distracted, checking his phone constantly, every time he'd asked casual questions about my work schedule, my banking habits, my online shopping preferences, he'd been gathering intelligence, not just on me, but probably on everyone in our circle. I thought about our cousin Rachel, who'd mentioned unusual charges on her card last month, about family friend Mrs. Rodriguez, who'd complained about identity theft around Christmas, about my coworker Jenny, who Marcus had met at my birthday party and seemed unusually interested in her job at the credit union. I called Officer Martinez immediately. "I think my brother's part of something bigger," I told her, sending over the screenshot. She was quiet for a long moment after viewing it. "Isabella, this changes the scope of our investigation significantly. I'm going to need to involve federal authorities. Credit card fraud across state lines, organized criminal activity. This isn't just local anymore. Federal authorities. The FBI. My little brother, who used to build elaborate Lego cities and cried when he accidentally stepped on ants, was now a federal criminal." But I wasn't done digging. Something about that house in the Instagram story looked familiar. I scrolled through more of Marcus's social media, looking for location tags or identifying features. Then I found it. A Snapchat story from his girlfriend Destiny, posted from the same party with a geotag for a specific address in Thornton, Colorado. I wrote down the address and did something that probably wasn't smart but felt necessary. I drove there. The house was a modest ranch in a middle-class neighborhood, the kind of place where families grilled burgers on weekends and kids rode bikes in the street. Nothing about it screamed criminal enterprise. But as I sat in my car across the street, I noticed details that didn't fit. Multiple luxury cars in the driveway, despite the modest house. People coming and going at odd hours, staying only minutes at a time. Window blinds drawn tight in the middle of a sunny afternoon. And cameras. Lots of security cameras for such an unassuming property. I was about to leave when I saw him, Marcus, walking up the driveway with a backpack, looking around nervously before knocking. The door opened immediately, like someone had been watching for him. He disappeared inside, and I waited, my heart hammering against my ribs. 20 minutes later, he emerged without the backpack, but carrying a small package. He looked different. Thinner than when I'd last seen him, more paranoid, constantly checking over his shoulder. I followed him at a distance as he drove to a Walgreens parking lot where he met a woman I didn't recognize. They talked briefly through their car windows, then she handed him an envelope while he passed her the package from the house. A transaction. I took photos of everything. The license plates, the woman's face, the exchange. I was building a case without fully understanding what I was building it for. That evening, I called my Uncle David, my father's brother who worked in cybersecurity for a major bank. I trusted him more than my parents, who'd probably find a way to defend Marcus even if he'd robbed Fort Knox. "Uncle David, I need advice about something serious," I began, and then told him everything. The credit card theft, the organized fraud ring, the house, the exchanges I'd witnessed. He listened without interrupting, which scared me more than if he had been shocked.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
"Isabella, you need to be very careful here," he said finally. "What you're describing sounds like a sophisticated operation. These people don't mess around. If Marcus is involved with organized credit card fraud, he's in deep with some dangerous individuals." He paused, and I could hear him typing. "I'm going to make some calls. I have contacts in financial crimes units who deal with this stuff regularly. But promise me you'll stop surveilling them. Let the professionals handle this." I promised, but I was lying. The next day, I drove past the house again, this time noticing a detail I'd missed before. A small business sign in the front yard, weathered and partially hidden by an overgrown hedge. "Mountain View Tech Solutions," it read, with a phone number. I called the number from a payphone at a gas station, using a voice I hoped sounded professional. "Mountain View Tech Solutions," a man answered. We provide IT support for small businesses. What can I help you with today? I made up a story about needing help with credit card processing from my fictional boutique. He was eager to help, offering services that sounded legitimate, until he mentioned their special payment processing options for businesses with unique needs. When I pressed for details, he became evasive, suggesting we meet in person to discuss advanced solutions. I hung up, my hands shaking. This wasn't just credit card fraud. They were running a front business, probably laundering money and providing criminal services under the guise of legitimate IT support. Marcus wasn't just stealing credit cards and buying drugs. He was part of a professional criminal organization with multiple revenue streams and sophisticated operations. The FBI took my information seriously. Agent Sarah Chen, a financial crime specialist, interviewed me for 3 hours, going over every detail I'd gathered. She was particularly interested in the house, the business front, and the systematic nature of the fraud. Your brother may have stumbled into something much bigger than he realizes, she told me. These operations often recruit addicts specifically because they're desperate and easy to manipulate, but they also dispose of them when they become liabilities. The implication chilled me. Marcus wasn't just risking prison time, he was risking his life. Agent Chan explained that organized credit card fraud rings often operated like drug cartels, with hierarchies, territories, and violent enforcement of rules. Low-level operatives like Marcus, who did the actual stealing and purchasing, were easily replaceable and often eliminated if they knew too much or became too much of a risk. I went home that night, torn between wanting justice and fearing for my brother's safety. The FBI was building a case, but these investigations took time, months, maybe years of surveillance and evidence gathering before they could make arrests. Meanwhile, Marcus was sinking deeper into a world that could kill him, using my stolen money to buy his way into more danger. 3 days later, my phone rang at 6 in the morning. It was my mother, crying so hard I could barely understand her. "Isabella, they took Marcus. The police, they came to the house looking for him. They had a warrant. They said he's involved with identity theft and federal crimes. What's happening? How did this happen?" I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of everything I knew and hadn't told them. "Mom, I need to tell you something." I began, and then explained everything. The stolen credit cards, the fraud ring, the FBI investigation, my role in providing evidence. The silence that followed was deafening. When she finally spoke, her voice was cold, in a way I'd never heard her before. "You turned in your own brother? Your own flesh and blood?" The accusation hung between us like a blade. The FBI raid happened on a Tuesday morning at exactly 5:47 a.m. I know, because Agent Chen called me as it was happening. "We're executing search warrants at multiple locations," she said, her voice tight with controlled excitement. "The house you identified, 3 other properties, and 2 storage units. Your brother's information helped us map out the entire network." I sat in my kitchen, coffee mug trembling in my hands, listening to the distant sound of sirens through my phone. What they found exceeded everyone's expectations. The Mountain View Tech Solutions house wasn't just a front operation. It was the nerve center of a multi-million-dollar criminal enterprise. 17 computers running sophisticated skimming software, industrial-grade card readers and writers capable of producing thousands of fake credit cards daily, a database containing personal information on over 50,000 individuals across 12 states. Cash bundled in vacuum-sealed packages totaling nearly $2 million, and drugs, enough fentanyl, cocaine, and methamphetamine to supply half of Colorado for months. But the most shocking discovery came from Marcus himself. When they arrested him at a motel in Westminster, he was carrying a notebook containing detailed records of every transaction he had made, every card he had stolen, every person he had targeted, including a comprehensive list of our entire extended family, with their social security numbers, birth dates, and financial information. My cousin Rachel, my uncle David, my grandmother who lived in assisted living, even my deceased grandfather's identity was being used for credit applications. The betrayal cut deeper than I thought possible. It wasn't just my credit cards Marcus had stolen. He had systematically harvested personal information from every family gathering, every holiday dinner, every casual conversation where relatives mentioned their banks, their jobs, their addresses. He turned our family into his personal identity theft catalog, selling our most private information to criminals who used it to destroy lives across the country. Agent Chen showed me photos from the raid during our follow-up meeting. Stacks of fake IDs with family members' faces, credit cards embossed with names I recognized from childhood Christmas lists, bank statements for accounts opened in identities of people who trusted Marcus enough to let him into their homes. Your brother wasn't just a low-level operative. He was a primary intelligence gatherer. His access to family members made him extremely valuable to this organization. The scope of the operation was staggering. Investigators traced connections to similar fraud rings in 7 states with evidence of coordination at the federal level. The legitimate tech business provided perfect cover for money laundering, allowing them to process millions in fraudulent transactions through seemingly normal merchant accounts. They'd been operating for nearly 3 years, with Marcus involved for at least 18 months. My credit cards were actually among his most recent targets, suggesting he'd exhausted easier marks and was now victimizing those closest to him. My parents' reaction was predictable and heartbreaking. Dad showed up at my apartment the day after the arrest, his face flushed with anger I'd rarely seen directed at me. 23 years, he said, standing in my doorway like an accusation. 23 years we raised him, loved him, supported him through every mistake, and you destroyed it all with one phone call to the police? He wouldn't listen when I tried to explain that Marcus had already destroyed everything himself. In his mind, I was the villain who'd chosen strangers over family. Mom's approach was different but equally painful. She launched a campaign to convince everyone that Marcus was a victim, manipulated by older criminals who had taken advantage of his addiction and vulnerability. She started prayer circles at their church, started a fund for his legal defense, and told anyone who'd listen that I'd betrayed my own brother out of spite over some credit card charges. The narrative she created painted me as vindictive and him as misguided, ignoring the mountain of evidence showing his central role in victimizing dozens of families. The media attention was relentless. Local man, central figure in multi-million-dollar fraud ring, ran in the Denver Post with Marcus's booking photo prominently displayed. The story detailed how he'd used family connections to gather intelligence, making our surnames synonymous with betrayal and criminal activity in our community. Neighbors whispered when they saw me checking my mail. Coworkers asked uncomfortable questions about whether I'd known what he was doing. The shame wasn't mine to carry, but it clung to me anyway. Marcus's trial began 8 months later. The evidence was overwhelming, documented in his own handwriting and corroborated by surveillance footage, bank records, and testimony from victims across multiple states. He pleaded guilty to 47 federal charges, including identity theft, credit card fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit racketeering. The prosecution requested 12 years in federal prison. His defense attorney argued for leniency based on his addiction and cooperation with authorities. I testified as a victim impact witness, standing in a federal courthouse facing my brother across a crowded courtroom for the first time since his arrest. He looked smaller somehow, wearing an orange jumpsuit instead of the designer clothes he'd bought with stolen money. When I spoke about the financial devastation, the destroyed credit, the months of rebuilding my life, he stared at his hands. But when I mentioned the family members whose identities he'd sold, whose grandchildren would grow up dealing with the consequences of his actions, he finally looked up. The moment our eyes met, I saw something I hadn't expected, not defiance or anger, but genuine horror at what he'd done.
For just a few seconds, through the addiction and criminal behavior, I glimpsed the brother I'd grown up with, the one who'd helped me build snow forts and shared his Halloween candy. The recognition in his eyes told me he understood, perhaps for the first time, the full scope of his betrayal. Judge Morrison sentenced him to 10 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. During his statement before sentencing, Marcus apologized directly to me and to the other family members present. I convinced myself I was just surviving, just funding my addiction, he said, his voice breaking. I never let myself think about the real people behind those numbers. I turned my own family into victims because it was easier than facing what I'd become. The other members of the fraud ring received harsher sentences. The leaders got 20 to 25 years. The tech specialist who designed their skimming software got 15 years. Marcus's cooperation had been valuable, but his role as an intelligence gatherer and his betrayal of family members made him a particularly unsympathetic defendant. Recovery took longer than I'd anticipated. The financial restoration happened relatively quickly once the FBI investigation concluded. The bank returned the stolen funds, the credit card companies removed the fraudulent charges, and my credit score gradually recovered. But the emotional healing was more complex. Trust, once shattered so completely, doesn't reassemble easily. I found myself suspicious of casual questions from friends, protective of personal information in ways that bordered on paranoia. My relationship with my parents never fully recovered. They maintained their position that I should have handled things within the family rather than involving law enforcement. The fact that Marcus's actions had victimized dozens of other families seemed irrelevant to them. They attended his sentencing hearing and continued visiting him in federal prison, treating him as a victim of circumstances rather than the architect of his own destruction. But something unexpected emerged from the wreckage. Other family members, initially shocked by the revelations, began reaching out with support and understanding. My Uncle David, whose cybersecurity expertise had helped me navigate the early stages of the investigation, became a crucial ally in rebuilding family relationships fractured by Marcus's crimes. Cousin Rachel, whose identity had been compromised, thanked me for uncovering the extent of the fraud before more damage was done. 5 years later, I received a letter from Marcus in federal prison. His handwriting had changed, becoming more careful and deliberate. He'd completed addiction treatment programs and was working toward a college degree in business administration. The letter was long, detailed, and unflinchingly honest about his actions and their consequences. He didn't ask for forgiveness or make excuses. He simply acknowledged the full scope of what he'd done and expressed genuine remorse for the pain he had caused. I know I can't undo the damage. I can't give back the sense of security I stole from you and everyone else I victimized. I can't repair the relationships I destroyed or erase the fear I created. But I want you to know that stopping me was the right thing to do, even though it took years in prison for me to understand that. You saved lives, Isabella. You prevented other families from experiencing what ours went through. I kept that letter for months before responding. When I finally wrote back, it was brief but honest. I told him I was proud of his progress in treatment and education. I told him I hoped he could build a legitimate life after his release. But I also told him that some betrayals create permanent distance, that some trust, once shattered so completely, doesn't reassemble easily. We could be civil, even cordial, but we could never be close in the way siblings should be. Marcus was released to a halfway house last year after serving 8 years of his sentence. He works at a nonprofit organization that helps former addicts find employment and housing. He's been clean for over 6 years and has remarried to a woman who knew about his past before they met. They live quietly in a different state, building a life as far from his criminal history as possible. We exchange holiday cards now, brief updates on major life events, polite but distant communication between two people who share DNA and childhood memories, but not much else. He's my brother, and I'm glad he's alive and sober and building something positive from the ruins of his former life. But he's also the person who taught me that family loyalty has limits, that love doesn't require enabling destruction, and that sometimes protecting yourself and others means accepting that some relationships can never be repaired. The FBI raid that began with stolen credit cards ended up dismantling a criminal network that had been victimizing thousands of people. The money recovered helped restore stolen funds to families across the country. The investigation led to enhanced security measures at banks and credit card companies that prevent similar schemes. Sometimes doing the right thing means choosing strangers over family, justice over loyalty, and truth over comfort. It's not a choice anyone should have to make, but when faced with it, I'm grateful I chose correctly. Today, I work as a victim advocate for the Federal Trade Commission, helping people navigate identity theft and financial fraud recovery. My experience with Marcus and the fraud ring gave me unique insights into how these crimes ripple through families and communities. Every case I handle reminds me that behind every stolen credit card number is a real person dealing with destroyed credit, financial stress, and violated trust. The irony isn't lost on me that my brother's crimes led me to a career protecting other victims from similar devastation. I've helped hundreds of people rebuild their financial lives after fraud, walk them through the complex process of disputing charges and restoring credit scores. Many of them ask me how someone could steal from their own family, and I tell them what I've learned. Addiction and greed can corrupt anyone, even those we love most. Sometimes former clients recognize my last name from news coverage of Marcus's case. When they make the connection, their reactions vary. Some are uncomfortable, wondering if criminality runs in families. Others are grateful, understanding that my personal experience with fraud makes me more effective at helping them navigate their own recovery. I've learned to be honest about the connection while maintaining professional boundaries. Marcus completed his supervised release 2 years ago. He sent me a graduation announcement when he finished his bachelor's degree in social work, earned entirely while in federal custody. He's working at a rehabilitation center now, helping other addicts understand the consequences of their actions and build legitimate paths forward. We don't speak often, but when we do, the conversations are cordial and brief. He's become someone I can respect from a distance, even if I can't fully trust or forgive. My parents and I have developed an uneasy peace. They've stopped defending Marcus's actions and acknowledged the harm he caused, though they still believe I should have found a way to handle things within the family rather than involving law enforcement. We have dinner once a month, carefully avoiding topics that